Today, we've got a pretty full docket. We've got a very special guest here, Sam Ross, who's the co-founder and CEO of Numeral. So we're going to go through a bunch of things, all things sales tax. We're going to cover the Touchland acquisition, as everybody probably saw, massive, nearly $1 billion acquisition for a hand sanitizer brand by Church & Dwight. We'll touch on opening your own factory and the pros and the cons of doing your manufacturing. And then lastly, we'll debate FIGS. We will see the bull case and the bear case for the publicly traded D2C scrubs brand FIGS. So stick with us through all this. Is an action-packed episode, and let's get into it.
So we have Sam here. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Do you want to? Where are you from?
I grew up here in the Bay Area. And
I meant which company, Sam?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we don't care. We don't care about your life.
Yeah.
Work. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Numeral, and Numeral helps e-commerce businesses with their sales tax compliance.
Awesome. Drew, what do you think of sales tax? How fun was it for you?
I am excited that Sam is here to join us. Because I actually DM'd Sam not that long ago, a couple weeks ago, and we got on the phone and just yapped a little bit. I have seen now firsthand the actual cost of sales tax. Like before, my whole thing was like, oh, it just sucks to do, but I never did it wrong. We had like a customer or two that like was actually doing it wrong and like literally was like losing like 6 or 7 figures, and like not like probably 6 figures per month, like certainly 7 figures annually, and so I think, we can take this conversation wherever we want. But honestly, I think the most value would just be using it as like an education point, because I don't think a lot of these people even understand like the different nexuses and like how to configure it even in like your Shopify account and like all the different things that you have. And like I did like a NetSuite implementation too at one point that was like kind of tricky with that stuff. So Sam, I would love for you just to give us like some value here, right, in the form of education. So like what are like the typical pitfalls? Like what do you need to do from day one? Like how do we avoid literally lose, like this brand that we were working with was like literally like hemorrhaging. They're a really good brand, so I shouldn't say that, but like it was an expensive mistake.
Makes sense. Maybe I'll just give like a brief context on even how sales tax came to be for the way it works for e-commerce today. So, I used to run my own brands on Shopify, and this is, say 2017. I was based in California selling, jewelry, and I'd ship to my customer in Illinois, and it would be tax-free. It was great. It was great for the customer, maybe not for the state's coffers. And I would even buy. I would never buy my Apple products here. I'd like buy from some company like B&H Camera in New York because I could always get my MacBooks tax free. But obviously the states wanted to make revenue from that. So there was a big Supreme Court ruling end of 2018 called Wayfair versus South Dakota. South Dakota sued Wayfair, the furniture brand, because they weren't paying any tax. They weren't collecting and remitting sales taxes there. And after that, what happened was there was this 5-4 ruling, and each state then started. There was determined that states could force out-of-state merchants to collect and remit taxes into their state. So each state then started passing what are called these like nexus threshold rules. Yeah. So a state like yours in Illinois, if I sell 200 orders or $100,000 of goods in the last 12 months. Now I need to.
You have that memorized, by the way.
Oh man, I know pretty much the esoteric rules I know around sales tax are disgusting and embarrassing at this point. It's like a party trick. And so, yeah, if you sell that into a state, what you're legally supposed to do is then immediately start collecting on all your next order after that. Your 201st order, you need to collect sales tax. And again, it's not just Illinois sales tax. You have to figure out, Chicago sales tax, maybe Southern Chicago School District tax, the county tax.
I was going to say name another city in Illinois.
Yeah, and there's what? There's
I don't even know what county.
There's like 30,000 jurisdictions in the U.S., right?
There's 13,000 tax jurisdictions. And it can be like. There's this like famous block in Colorado where the west side of the block is one tax rate and the east side of the block is another tax rate. That's how you test how good someone's tax calculation engine is. It's nutty. And so yeah, so then the onus is on you as a business to go and register in Illinois as an out-of-state merchant, and you start filing there typically on a quarterly or monthly basis. And so you can imagine, it was a super chaotic moment and after 2018, because a lot of these rules hadn't been set up, and you're going from being registered just in your home state, your local CPA. For me, it was taking care of it, so it wasn't something I had to really think about. To all of a sudden, you're filing with Mississippi and West Virginia, and 47 different states are collecting sales tax. And that's what makes it really hard. Is it's this decentralized system. The IRS feels very easy compared to that. And so as your business grows, you cross more and more of these different thresholds. The other way you might have to register in a state typically is if you have what's called a physical having a 3PL somewhere, or an employee, technically contractors in certain cases.
Oh, so not even just a store. It's like any.
Yeah, that's why for a long time people would avoid having physical nexus in California with like their 3PL there or something. Even like, you just want to avoid it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And there's esoteric rules that are not really enforced, but if you send physical mail marketing in like Tennessee, like technically you need to register there. Now I've never have I seen Tennessee audit someone for that? No, but that's what also makes it complicated too. Is if you actually read every single rule, you have nexus every single state. But often what's enforced is usually more like the economic rules and things like that.
And okay, so we've established that like it's a pain and it's complicated. Tell us about like the essentially like accrued liability, like if you're not in compliance, and like how that can affect a business.
Yeah, great question. Right. So again, you're not maybe paying attention to what are the nexus threshold rules in West Virginia or somewhere like that. And so especially, during this period right after the Supreme Court ruling, where these rules were just getting passed willy-nilly by the states. And so it's easy to, we see all the time, even like big successful businesses, we never registered in, I don't know, California, let's say, because you're based in Oklahoma. And you go for a little while, then all of a sudden you get audited, let's say, from California. They send you a letter. Hey, we saw literally this happened to a client. They're like, we saw your business on Shark Tank, and like, we realize you're not registered in our state. So often even getting publicity can be challenging. And so you're like, okay, I have to go deal with this. Well, what they want then is that they'll go calculate what is that date that you cross that threshold rule, or what is it, what is the date that your employee started here, et cetera. And so now you have to go pay all the back taxes owed, plus penalties and interest. So what I mean by that is, let's say, you sold 10 million over that period in California, the average tax rate maybe something like 8%. So now you owe $80,000 in back taxes that you could have passed on to your customers, but instead now you're eating out of pocket. Plus, penalties and interest accrue, and so now maybe you owe $15,000, and all of your profits from that whole time period in California are wiped out. And what's even worse is, like, let's say at some point your business goes bankrupt, they can actually come after you personally as a business owner. And so, yeah, I had some issues back when I was selling early on, and that was sort of the impetus to start a better business around this. Just because I think it's a very unfair burden and onus on e-commerce founders who have so many other things to do. Why are they dealing with all 47 different states? No other country in the world
literally
works
sounds made
like
up
this.
when you explain the problem to people. I've probably explained it a few times to people who aren't in e-commerce, and they looked at me like I was just really stupid. They're like, no, that can't actually exist. There's no way that's real. The government would never do that. I'm like, I'm not making it up. You can literally Google it. It sounds made up, but it's totally
think
real.
About it. It's like e-commerce, like what really started, Sam, when? Like what would you say is the year that e-commerce really started?
I would say e-commerce started when Facebook. So I was at a company called Teespring, and we were like doing this startup.
I used
sort of like
to sell there when I was a kid.
So okay, amazing. So yeah, my high school friend started it, and
cool.
this is a platform to sell T-shirts on, but it was basically when the Facebook news feed came out. I think it was 2013, 2014. The business was like okay, and we were Y Combinator, and then it just went like this. And then we had Sam Altman join our board, Keith Raboy, all these like injuries.
Oh, what?
Because it was this it had this insane spike. We were the number one payment processing at some point on Stripe, and we all thought Sam Altman came to our office. This is going to be a $10 billion business, but so I'm getting distracted. But the point was, I think, Facebook newsfeed ads is really got things to work. And Teespring was not collecting sales tax.
Sam? When were you there?
I think 2013, I want to say, to 2015, 2016, something like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's right around when I started selling there. Because I had like a guitar community. I'm like, how do I monetize this? So I made some t-shirts.
It was it was interesting. So maybe getting a little off topic, but there was all of these affiliates, people making money online was like your affiliate, like on display ads. That was a big community. Then they all migrated to Teespring. And then after a few years of Teespring, where Teespring they wouldn't give you the email list of all your customers. They were kind of handicapping you in some ways. Everyone's like, oh, like go and start a Shopify business, and they started doing a lot of them started doing drop shipping on Shopify, because then you felt like you owned your business more. And then many of those migrated and actually created real brands. And so it was like a really common path where Teespring was like a stepping stone to becoming an e-commerce entrepreneur.
That makes sense.
So the reason I asked the question was just to demonstrate how long it takes for like the law to adapt, right? And to me, like what it feels like is that like e-commerce basically grew. I agree that was probably like a good inflection point. I would argue maybe 8 or 10 years earlier is like the inception of it, even though it was reality even earlier than that.
Sure.
And so like there's probably like 15 years where like, Congress or whoever is like trying to figure out what to do. And then it's like, this is the best shit that they come up with. Like, are you guys kidding?
It's let's just say if you look at the average age of Congress, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, the messed up thing is Congress hasn't done anything ever, right? It was a Supreme Court ruling. So the Supreme Court, they're just like, it was like a 5-4 decision. So it could have gone either way. And they're just literally like one person created this whole thing because it could have been gone the other way. And during the ruling, they're like, like the people that dissented are like, this is going to chaos. Like Congress should pass a law. This shouldn't be the Supreme Court, but they just did it. And so then you have all these 50 states, only something, I think 46 states plus DC actually do sales tax, but they all scrambled to figure out what the hell to do, because it's even early on they were worried, what's going to happen to like these individual Etsy sellers that are selling $20. They're going to have to go register. And so they worked out with the marketplaces. They created this concept called marketplace facilitator, where they'll take care of it for you, but Shopify merchants still had this onus themselves.
And it's kind of weird. It actually did, it kind of ruined some of the marketplaces. Like I used to buy used guitars off of reverb.com. And I used to use eBay a lot too. I love eBay, but I love hunting for random stuff on eBay. It's very satisfying. I was going to say
you would like eBay.
It's like, I used to buy like industrial equipment from there, everything, but they had to start charging sales tax. So I was like, why even bother? It's kind of weird because I'm buying from like Drew. It's like, it's kind of ruined it.
Yeah, but I'm selling Mehtab my used goods. Mm-hmm. But Sam, tell us about, so like when I went Mad Rabbit, the way that we handled sales tax in the beginning, I literally hired like a freelancer off Upwork. And that like was like, it was onerous. Like it was tough. But this is like before Numeral. Well, maybe not before you, I don't know when you started, but like I didn't know that it existed at that time in like 2019, call it. And I hired this guy and he would charge us, I think it was like something like $100 a state or something like that, maybe $50 a state. This is a while ago now. And he would literally file individually every single state. So tell us a little about how Numeral like automates that and like where you actually are like delivering value to the merchants aside from like that kind of a workflow.
Yeah, I would say, so just maybe to talk it through my experience, right? So all the Supreme Court ruling happened. At that point, I had a jewelry brand called Dear Ava, where I can get a whole rant about that. But we, I use this software called Avalara. They're kind of the big incumbent in the space.
We've been screwed by them many times. Anyways, like they just increased their prices randomly on us one time by, I think 1.5 or 2x or something absolutely insane. I was like, anyways.
Yeah, so Avalara, the problem with Avalara is, it was sort of this tool designed for big corporate controllers, but then this huge market opened up where, their TAM doubled overnight because all these small e-commerce businesses needed help. And so they took this kind of enterprise software and tool and started selling it to, e-commerce founders and, e-commerce operators. And I think, it was just kind of a mismatch. And my feeling always was, look, sales tax adds zero value to your business. This is purely compliance. I want to be strategic with my finance and, work on all the stuff you guys talk about. How do I do my planning and buying and saving on income taxes, things like this. But sales tax, I just want to get it off my plate. And so my feeling was, you really want kind of an end-to-end service, not a tool or software. And so that was always, the idea of Numeral was, we're not building a tool, we're really building a service. Now, I don't go pitch that to VCs out of the gate, like, hey, we're building a service business. Gross margins are going to be lower, but that's really been sort of at least the framing of how we think about what we build. And so, yeah. It would be helpful, I guess, to explain like how it works, or
that's yeah. And then I'm even more curious now that you've layered in this like service idea.
Yeah. I would just say, so the way it works basically is, you connect your Shopify or Stripe or Amazon or your sources, right? And then, you go and we'll produce a free nexus. We call it nexus study for you. So we tell you, hey, you have liability in these 17 states. Maybe you've been paying some of them. Maybe maybe you're already compliant. You just need to get that transferred over to us. And then we'll go, but if you need to get registered, we'll go get you registered with the states on your behalf, and then, file and remit the money on an ongoing basis, and make sure in the meantime, you're collecting taxes along the way, in the right places. And collecting taxes is not as simple as you think, because you have to make sure you have the right product taxing. So I'm here, California, drinking flat water. If that water contains a few bubbles in it, all of a sudden it goes from being not taxable to taxable, because California has a law saying carbonated beverages are taxable.
Crazy.
And then on top of that, there's, the more services stuff I'm talking about is more these smaller things. So I had this thing where I would hate getting, I worked from home, so I get all the physical mail from states to my home address, right?
Yeah,
so
it's really bad, right? It's like you get like hundreds. It's crazy, yeah.
I throw out every single one. I never read any of them. I figured they'll call me if it's important.
So you get this fat stack, right? Department of Revenue, South Dakota, West Virginia, Alabama, and it's every time you open the mail, it's almost like a mini cortisol shot for me, because whenever I see it, like anything, even IRS, all these things, because you worry, right? Is it going to be some penalty or something? So it just ends up sitting on the coffee table, or some folks goes to the PO box, and so. But you do need to monitor it, right? So maybe to give you an example, like what a thing that goes wrong all the time we see with folks is, they're using Avalara, the mail goes to their house, and New Mexico, you've been filing every quarter. New Mexico sends you a piece of physical mail saying, "Hey Sam, your gummy business is doing better. We see, so now you're selling more to New Mexico. So you need to file monthly with us." And so then you typically have something like 7 days to go to that you're within your Avalara account or whatever tool you're using, update New Mexico from quarterly to monthly. So some really simple thing that you wouldn't think too much about. But if you miss that, then what happens is, inevitably a few months later, New Mexico sends you a letter in the mail. "Hey, Sam, you've actually you're now delinquent because you should have been filing monthly, but you'd only been filing quarterly with us. So now you have like 4 or 5 months of delinquent filings. And there's not only do you owe those taxes, you have a bunch of penalties and interest you've accrued. So you ping Avalara, and they put you on a sales call with their managed services team. They say, hey, yeah, we can solve this for you, but it's going to cost you typically 7 to 10 times more than your normal filing fee, because this is a managed service. And on top of that, you now owe all this money. And so this small thing kind of spirals into being a huge headache. So one of the first things we built was, let's scan all the physical mail from our clients I was like reading it by hand by myself, like hundreds of pieces of mail early on in the business, trained some folks up, and now a lot of that work is actually getting done, fortunately, by LLMs. But so the mail comes to us in New Mexico. We see it's switching from quarterly to monthly. We just updating the system. It gets resolved, and you don't have to think about it. So it's really what we're trying to do is just save you from death by 1,000 paper cuts, which is like because managing avalar, none of it's hard, but it's just like boring, low value work you don't want to think about.
We go through the guarantee, by the way. Thought that was very cool. I don't think that's something, I don't know anyone else who offers something like that.
Yeah, I would just say like broadly, we want to stand behind our work. I don't want to get memory tested the terms of the guarantee, but like broadly, and often I've guaranteed stuff beyond this too for clients. But like if we make a mistake, right? Like we're supposed to be collecting and we forgot to collect, or we accidentally filed late or something, and you accrued some penalties, we'll do a make good. And so I've wired customers money for mistakes we've made, and like you just want to. Yeah, like you want to stand behind your work, and if I make a mistake, why am I going to put that onus on top of my customer? And so Avalar never does this, and so often that's why people get really frustrated.
That makes sense.
One other thing, and then maybe we can get the train rolling. For either of you to answer is like, so I've heard like nightmare stories about like you go to sell your business, right, and you like haven't been collecting sales tax. And like, they find out or whatever, the 2-yard line, and then you end up like getting knocked $2 million or something. Have either of you guys experienced that firsthand? Or can you tell us a little bit about that?
I dealt with it a ton, and so we were like very active acquiring in 2019, 2020. And the standard practice around 2019 was just to do like a holdback, basically, more or less, hold back a portion in escrow for something like that. Now it's changed. Yeah. Like now I think there's no excuse not to be compliant. Like everyone knows what's going on, but in 2020 or 2019, it was still pretty fresh. So,
but we still see it all the time with, people will come to us probably when by the time it's too late, they're like, I'm in the middle of an M&A transaction. They're telling me to put, $500,000 in this escrow account. And I mean, I had that happen too one time. I was selling my business and it was a smaller amount. I think it was something like $70K, but it was still frustrating to have to take off $70K that was going to go into my pocket and put into an escrow account because there had been some miscollection in a state.
Yep. Yeah, it's brutal. I think the cost, like there's obviously value to a system like Numeral from like even just like a head count or like hourly rate perspective or whatever. But probably the higher value is like just the peace of mind of like, I'm not going to have to get rugged at any point. So I think there's like two reasons that I'm a fan of it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, look, we're not trying to like make you more money, but we're trying to save you from getting dinged and losing money, and also just trying to. The biggest value I think is just trying to save you time and energy, right? As an operator, as you guys know, there's just so many things you have to think about, and this stuff is just pure brain damage. There's no value in you spending any time on it. And so that when we started the business, I think a lot of, I've been dealing with myself. So a lot of people when they start a software business, they interview hundreds of customers, they do all this stuff. I didn't interview anyone. It was just like, what do I want? Right. It's like, I want to spend minimal amount of time on this. And if there is an issue, I want someone to at least respond to me. And so it's not, it's a pretty simple proposition.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. Anything else on like the Numeral specific front that we should cover?
No, I probably should have some stuff to shill, but I'm not. Yeah, I didn't.
Well, here, give
anything.
us your plug. Give it. Well, do you have anything you want to just plug real quick?
No, I'd say, yeah, look, if you, the only thing I'd say is, if folks want to learn more, we also we call it like a free nexus study for them. So, you just go on our website, sign up and create an account. And, like I said, you connect all your data sources, tell us where you have 3PLs and things like this, and we'll produce, a free report, and you can leave it on, right? You don't, we do free monitoring. So anytime you get nexus in a new state, you get an alert. So even if you don't want to work with us, we still have this free tool just to make it easier to understand where you have nexus, because Shopify has some native tools. You've probably seen those alerts where they say, hey, looks like you maybe need to register in Iowa or somewhere like that. But the problem is those rules are often include marketplace sales and other sales from other channels. And so you want to make in California, the threshold is 500,000, so it's pretty high. But if you sell 490,000 on Amazon and 15,000 on Shopify, you actually have an obligation to register here. So you definitely want to make sure you're looking at your sales across not just your Shopify, but also all your marketplaces that we connect to. So yeah, happy to always produce a free report for anyone. You can just use that tool, and just a good way to make sure you understand any liabilities or risks that you're accruing.
Free tool. No excuses now. You have to go check out the guys at Numeral.
Yeah, and feel free to DM me on Twitter if you have any questions or issues. I do a lot of customer support myself.
Yeah. I feel what's your Twitter? Spam Ross, is that right?
At Spam Ross, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been a marketer for years, so people used to call me Spam Ross. In college, I went to UCLA. There was a database of every student's UCLA email address, so we scraped it. And then, back then there was less spam detection, so we'd send. All my friends would get so annoyed because I was always sending them emails to sell them stuff. So yeah, that's how I earned the moniker.
That's amazing.
Sweet. Okay, well, let's get maybe. I think we have a bit of an agenda here. I think it would be a mistake while we have Sam not to ask him a little bit about their recent fundraise, just because it's pretty cool. And I think, Sam, you told a nice story on Turner Novak's podcast about it, at least a short one. I have a question though. Did you ever raise any money for your e-commerce businesses? No.
Okay. Always bootstrapped. Yeah, I had one, was crazy. We parlayed. I think we only put $5,000 in, and then did 30 million all-time sales. We were able to, back then when Facebook ad costs for like $3 cost per acquisition, you could recycle the money pretty well.
Yeah.
Now I think that's a little bit harder, but yeah, never raised outside capital.
Okay, because I at some point I want to do a longer thing about like raising money in software versus e-com, because I think it's worldly different. But give us the quick story on
your guys' it makes sense in software. It doesn't really make sense for consumer, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just different. So give us like the story about how you recently raised from Benchmark, which is like obviously like a if I don't know, the number one, if not the number two type VC. And tell us a little bit about like what that looked like, because we're the finance operators, right? So this fits right into the wheelhouse of what our listeners get curious about.
Yeah. So, we had a good track of a few months, and so decided we wanted to fundraise. Of course, we didn't think about the timing too well. We did it in the dead of summer, when you're not supposed to fundraise. A lot of the VCs are all at their Tahoe house, or I guess during summer, I don't know where they go, but Hawaii or something. And yeah, our finance, we didn't have a finance hire, just a fractional CFO. And so, our finances were in great order. I won't go on too boring of a rant, but, ARR, for example, right? This is not some GAAP compliant metric, and everyone has a little bit of massaging and magic how you calculate it. And our pricing is it's not traditional subscriptions. And so our finances were in great state. And I'd actually been on my deferred honeymoon in rural Hokkaido, Japan, at this like the nicest hotel I've ever stayed at. It was off season. I think it was off season, so it was only something like $3,500 a night.
How long did you defer your honeymoon for?
A year. Yeah. So my wife
done the same thing.
My wife was like, "Okay, you're gonna have interest on this honeymoon." So we had to, like, the longer we wait, the fancier it better be.
$3,500 a night.
But that was off season, right? This is like one of these hotels that looked like, in Ex Machina or something. Have you ever seen that movie? Like, just crazy, like built in nature. And
Jesus.
So it's like, I'm trying to enjoy this, but like I'm just getting like in arguments during the mornings. Getting on my laptop and getting arguments with my fractional CFO about how we define our ARR, and stressing out because I knew I had scheduled when I come back to start meeting with some VCs. Anyway. We get there and we get to the finish line. I come back. And Monday, the Monday of the fundraise, I just do a couple friendlies with just my friends just to make sure I get my pitch dialed in. And then Tuesday morning, I realized I hadn't, you usually when you do these fundraisers, right, you put together kind of a list of everyone you want to meet, like we call it like the investor CRM, just a Google sheet. And I realized Benchmark, obviously would have been top firm I wanted to get. I hadn't actually got the intro yet. So I got an intro Tuesday morning. Of course, Chethan, our now board member, responded in like 5 minutes and scheduled me for that evening. And so, I went to pitch him, and I think he's like Chethan's like an encyclopedia of all things SaaS. I tell him any category, and he can tell me like he knows the cohort numbers for all the companies within it, and what's the TAM size, what are the issues with that market. And so something like 10-15 minutes into the meeting, he's like, pause. He's like, I get this, like makes total sense to me. I'm totally buying this. Just open up your calendar. I'm like, why? He's like, we should like find more time this week. And so he invited me to dinner the next night, and then told me to block off something like 3 hours on Fridays. Like, I'm gonna try to get a partner, an emergency partner meeting on Friday. And I was like, I've been talking for like 15 minutes on Zoom with you. This is like crazy. But I think part of it too is, if it was like some second tier firm, I'd be like, dude, I'm not gonna block off my time for you to like this. Yeah. But he kind of had that leverage. And he had seen Avalara early on in his career, right after he graduated college, and he's been doing, I think, VC for 10-15 years. And so he knew the market, and he kind of knew the opportunity already, and was just kind of waiting for someone to come along. Of course, we had a nice little, good AI story that fit in at the time. Right. And then he just kind of monopolized my time, right? So we went and got dinner, and for a couple 3 hours, and immediately sent me like 6 references, which started taking up all my time. But they're like really good founders. Some of them are like public company founders, and so I'm not going to say no. It's like a great connection to make. And then I started texting some friends who I had been known for years, and I thought maybe they would do the round, and I felt bad because I could tell it was going fast, but he just like was able to move so fast. It ended up being Friday night. I was staying at my parents' house at the time. I was living in LA, and so they live in the Bay Area, and they're like, "Oh, aren't you like relieved the week's over?" And then I'm like texting Chethan. He's like, "I come to my office 9:30 tonight." I'm like, "No, I got to go back into the city like at 9:30." And we were fortunate to get something done. It was a very intense week, but it
was like 4 days start to finish or something, right?
It was 4 days start to finish, so that made it easy. But definitely, you also, the hard part with fundraising is that you also have to run your business, right? Especially at that time period where we were seed stage. I was on a lot of sales calls. I was still doing with customer service and all of that. So you end up, you wrap up fundraising at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, come back home, and then you start your work day, and that's what makes it so challenging. Is you can't, it's hard to just turn off doing your day-to-day work.
So 4 days to term sheet, right? You sign the term sheet, and then how much longer until, like, is there like more, like how much diligence happened on the back end?
Yeah, the diligence, the hard part, I think you go into these things is the diligence was probably not that bad. It's that like you sign the term sheet, but then that's not the actual documents you sign, right?
Yeah.
So you don't put every single term in the term sheet, or else you never get a term sheet signed. And so I don't remember, a few weeks, you're just negotiating over some minutia around, who can vote on what, and what happens in X scenario. And so, I don't know, it took a few weeks, but everything closed up, I think, in something like a month. It wasn't too crazy of a thing.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Like a month start to finish for $18 million or whatever is pretty crazy to me, at least.
I think these things get bifurcated, right, in the Valley. You either have a hot deal where it's like things go crazy. Like I had a friend recently, and like, the VC sniffed that it was a hot deal. So he went and got, 8 term sheets. This is a company that was, I think, doing something like 7 million ARR, and they got 8 term sheets. Someone ended up bidding over 700 million for this thing, right? It has like AI in it, so people go crazy. But like, he didn't even have to come to San Francisco.
Change the URL to numeralhq.ai.
Yeah, seriously.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, we literally, yeah, you have to, if you put AI front and center, like it literally like doubles the value of your company. And like he didn't even have like, he wasn't, and again, if you have a hot deal, he didn't even have a pitch deck or anything like that. It was just like, oh, we might fundraise, and then you get preempted, and then you just tell everyone, hey, I got preempted, and they're like thirsty, they don't have time to even do the due diligence, and like they're just like throwing you term sheets in like a day or two. You just show them a couple hot AI demos. So I think it's either like this, it's either like feast or famine, where you're just fundraising for months on end, pulling your hair out, like, getting rejection. And I've had cycles like that as well. And it's kind of never in the middle for whatever reason. It's probably because a lot of the VCs are Muppets and they just follow. There's like the really good VCs like Chethan who are like incredible, and then you have the people who don't think for themselves.
Yeah, it's funny because it used to be like a non-consensus sort of like ethos, and now it's basically like, how can I just invest in companies that are going to help me raise my next fund?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, you need to show a markup too, like midway through, so you can raise your next fund, right? Okay, cool. What do you want to talk about here? Is Touchland, FIGS, opening a factory? What do you feel like?
I think we have to touch on Touchland, at least for just a second. So did either of you guys see this deal?
Did you just say welcome 10?
I always say that. I keep saying that. I don't know why I keep saying that.
You know what, Drew, your brand is too good for that. Use fondue instead. Cashback feels like a deal, converts like a coupon, and doesn't train customers to wait for the next fire sale. Give it a shot. It's an easy install. Doesn't take much work. Memorial Day is coming up. So give that a shot. It's a good way to quickly test things, to juice your margins. Maybe you can stop discounting, do cashback, and I think you'll be surprised by how few customers claim it. We just ran a test with it again recently. Worked out really well. I would definitely recommend giving it a shot. Cheap, fast. Why not? Really, really big impact. Classic example of something, in my opinion, that's high impact, low effort. So why not do it?
What was that part of the matrix? What'd you call that? High impact, low effort? Isn't there like a name for it? Or is it just called high impact,
I can't
low
remember.
effort?
Yeah, I just call it high impact, low effort. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Let's roll into Touchland.
So do you guys know anything about this company and this deal?
I had literally never heard of Touchland until I read about the acquisition. And I was like, who's buying this? Like, who's this for? Who are the billionaires buying this stuff?
Did you figure it out?
It's just like hand sanitizer.
Yeah, but it's like somehow it became like a status symbol for like Gen Z kids. It's crazy to me. So like,
weird.
I have this one friend, this guy who runs a business, probably our second fastest growing business on Iris, and he's 20 years old. They're like going to be like a 9-figure brand, and it's hilarious because like I'm 27 and now I'm like old compared to this guy, and so like I hit him up and I was like, dude, like what's going on like with this Touchland thing? Like, have you heard of this? And he's like, oh, dude, like yeah, like it's the hottest thing ever. Like everybody loves it. Like it's literally like hand sanitizer, but like you carry it around like in like college or like high school or like wherever, and it's like somehow like a status signal. And I was like, I don't get that at all. And then he called me Unk, which like kind of stung, but so essentially like this brand started.
You should have said back cap. That's what you should have said.
I did. I was like, bro, like cap, dog. And it's funny because the guy the kid that I'm talking about, it's the company, it's like hair care for like Gen Z kids. So it's actually pretty hilarious. But anyway, so I guess these guys started in like 2010 and then like really kind of like blew up during COVID, like obviously. And then, end up obviously getting bought for $700 million at close, up to 880
But they started in 2010?
That's what I like read, and I was like, it sounds crazy. But then I saw the founder's LinkedIn post, and she was like, yeah, her name's Andrea, and she was like, it's been forever. So my guess is that they kind of like did whatever for 10 years, and then COVID kind of boosted that. Clearly, obviously, I think it's weird that it's happening now, though, sort of in a post-COVID world. So they must have just done an awesome job of sticking and somehow turning it into a cool category. So it goes for, call it 880 million. Church and Dwight is like a $20 billion publicly traded sort of hold co, I guess, of like, Trojan condoms.
Well.
And
they bought like,
so
they bought a few like heavier consumer, like modern consumer brands, like e-commerce heavy.
Church and Dwight did?
Yeah, like Hero.
Yeah. Well, Hero was a lot of retail too, but
they were like by the time they got purchased, but like their initial velocity was really heavy on Amazon actually.
Okay, that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting part that I would want to get your guys' take on is like everybody talks about TAM, right? And it's always all about TAM. How big is your TAM? Blah blah blah. So in Hero and Touchland, these two acquisitions. What's that?
I said, how big is your TAM? Whip it out.
Whip your TAM. These two acquisitions had, like, as far as I'm concerned, like small TAMs. So Hero, this is according to Church and Dwight. They said that when they bought Hero, this category of like acne care was worth $700 million, and then now they're saying it's worth $1.5 billion, largely due to Hero's growth. And Touchland, they're saying that this category, and this is domestic sizes, they're saying that this category is worth $600 million annually, and that they predict that it's going to be the same effect. Like Touchland is going to grow the category, which I think is like counterintuitive from the standpoint of like, everybody thinks like, oh, you need to be chasing these giant markets, when in reality, like, they're like 95% of like VCs, for example, wouldn't touch a $700 million market in software, or let alone consumer kind of a thing.
Cool. So I guess like what are the big takeaways with the Touchland acquisition, Drew? Like what's
well, this is I was gonna ask you guys, like, how do you think about TAM, I guess, if the goal is for an acquisition? Because according to Church and Dwight, at the very least, the TAM should be small. Like, their whole thesis is like, we want to buy the number 1 or 2 brand in like a small but growing TAM.
Yeah. For us, we're really focused on recouping our initial cash outlay quite fast so we can recycle. So we don't think too much about TAM beyond like, I want to make sure this can grow to whatever it needs to grow to make that happen, if that makes sense. We've been thinking about it more, like it needs to be able to rip, right? Like you don't want to be selling something too niche where you can't really get to scale. You don't want to run into a huge wall. You want something where you can launch into additional categories at the very least. Like we have a men's jewelry brand that sells rings. I think it's pretty niche the way it is now. The way I would describe our product assortment is it's pretty nerdy. Like you go on there and you'd be stoked. You'd be like, yeah, you know what? I love sci-fi. I love dark fantasy. And like, that's the kind of guy that's buying there. But if your girlfriend went on there, she'd be like, you're not allowed to buy a ring from here. So that's a problem, right? So we've been expanding categories that we're in, et cetera, and improving TAM, because I think we actually need to do that to grow. So that's just how we think of a high level, I guess.
I think the way I think about it too is there's sort of a trade-off here where the more niche the TAM, usually the more underserved it is, right? So, again, I was referencing before, I started my career and I was, I worked at Teespring, but I also sold on the nights and weekends. And when Facebook ads came out, it kind of unlocked all these micro TAMs, right? So I could target Chihuahua, there's fan pages back then. So I could target all the Chihuahua lovers, or one of the, to talk about even a better micro TAM, one of the the markets that would sell the best is I would try to target Oklahoma Sooners fans that live in Texas. So you just make like a shape of Texas, put the word Oklahoma in it, so it was vague enough that for IP reasons, and it'd be like 10,000 people or some small TAM, but the click-through rates would be like 20%. Everyone would be sharing it, it'd go viral because they're like, what actually was, I can't remember what the slogan of the Sooners, but like they'd be going crazy. And so this is like a super micro TAM. You're never going to build a real business, but because it's totally unserved, you get just insane metrics and insane customer love. And so I think that's like always the trade-off is like the biggest markets are the most penetrated and the most competitive. But I'm also I'm not going to I'm not going to create a business based off Sooner fans in Texas. And so I think if you're doing a venture-backed business, the TAM ends up mattering, right? Because ultimately those investors want to make a certain return. But if you're doing things that are, you're self-funded, I think, as long as you can get to a certain scale, and depends on what your goals are, the TAM is probably less important. And then also TAM expansion, obviously, you want to think about as well, right? Like, there was a big thing where a famous memo where someone's like, oh, Uber valued it, I think it was maybe like $10 billion is insane. That's already like half the taxi market cap, like TAM, and there's only X number of taxis. And then the famous thing was like, well, like actually people are going to take a lot more taxi rides or Uber rides now with Uber. And so you want to also think about like, can I expand this TAM? And so I think COVID probably expanded the TAM of hand sanitizers, and they got lucky from that. And maybe even post-COVID, now people have this new behavior they've adopted, particularly Gen Z.
I was one of the weirdos that used to carry hand sanitizer with me before I had like my backpacks everywhere. No, definitely not. It was like, what's that? Purell?
Purell.
Yeah, just Purell. Yeah. And I never shake hands with people. Always just give them a fist bump. No, I didn't. That wasn't for eating.
Protein hand sanitizer. Talk about tailwinds.
Drew, you're in Chicago, right? By the way,
I am.
I live in Chicago. The most famous man in Chicago, Al Capone.
Yes.
Do you know how he was taken down? Do you know, Sam? Do you know how he was taken down?
Sam should know. Sam, do you know?
Taxes, baby. Pay your taxes.
Yeah, it was taxes. It was taxes. That's right. Not a gun, not dealing drugs or something, but taxes. Fast forward to 2025, replace Al Capone speakeasy with their Shopify admin, swap G-Men for way too many state filings, and swap Al Capone for a nerdy D2C operator with a crippling caffeine addiction. And, miss one filing and suddenly you're reenacting the Untouchables minus the cool hats. So that's why we recommend Numeral. It makes it easy to file sales tax on time, every time. And they have a bulletproof guarantee. We have Sam with us today, but he could tell you more about it. But the guarantee makes it really awesome. Your accounting firm will never offer you anything like that. Trust me, I have lost a lot of money to bad accountants, and they'll never offer you anything like that. Woobles uses them. Graza, Muddy Bites. Who else, Sam?
We got Ridge Wallet over here. Mike's Hot Honey. We got some other good brands. Some unannounced as well.
Yeah. So head over to numeralhq.com. Tell them we sent you, and you'll be pleased. Cool. Where'd Drew go, by the way? Drew, where'd you go?
I disappeared for just a second.
Wow.
Okay. So last thing I'll yap about for Hero and the Touchland thing is just how similar it was to Hero. So a slightly richer valuation on a little bit more EBITDA and a tiny bit more sales. But so just like down the line here, Hero was $630 million. Touchland was $880 million. The sales of Hero at the time were 115. Sales for Touchland were 130 million. So it's like $15 million difference. EBITDA was within 3% on a margin perspective. So they both had like these crazy EBITDA margins. Hero was kicking 45 million, Touchland 55. So 39% and 42%. And then ultimately the EBITDA multiple for Hero was 14 versus 16x for Touchland. So it stood out to me how literally how similar these brands were. Like they were uber profitable, I think Hero was probably growing faster than Touchland, if I just had to guess based off of management's commentary, and small TAMs. So it's an interesting thing to think about. If you want to sell your business to Church and Dwight, all you need is 45% EBITDA margin and 9 figures of revenue.
All you need is software margins. Don't worry about it. Really easy.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. What do you want to cover next, Mehtab?
Do you want to do the FIGS thing, or do you want to go through opening your own factory? I just got a 7-figure tax refund from the Mexican government, which, we didn't get it yet in full, but we started getting it. So that's why I was thinking about the factory.
Okay. Well, yeah, sure. Tell us about that. I love 7-figure tax refunds. I've never gotten one, but I guess I would love one.
The way it works in Mexico basically is if you're a brand that's setting up there, you basically have to pay VAT on a lot of things, which is like a value-added tax. You can think of it as almost like a sales tax. You actually have to pay it on top of whatever import fees you owe. So let's say I'm importing a product for $10 and they have like some sort of tax on it for $20%. That gets bolted on, and then you get taxed on that amount. So it's crazy. Like it really, really adds up. And they're supposed to give you a refund as a company, but it's Mexico, and they're very fun to deal with. So we were supposed to receive our refund in I want to say Q4 2023 or Q1 2024. And since then, the amount's just been accumulating into like 7 figures of just cash sitting there with the Mexican government. And they'll deny you for like totally arbitrary reasons. So we just had to refile that like probably 4 or 5 times. And we finally got our money. Well, we're starting to get our money back. You get it in like installments basically. So we got a nice chunk back, which is nice. So at least we know the rest is coming. That was our first chunk. But total pain in the ass. Like we went through 2 accounting firms. They asked us for absolutely insane, made up sounding documents that my co-founder had to go and pull and then dig with the finance team. And it was just insane. We need a Numeral HQ for getting.
We have a beta product for international, but we're not doing Mexico because we'll eventually do it. But it was like to even get registered in Mexico, I think you have to like go stand in some line in Mexico City for an hour and get a wet signature, and it's like the most insane. So
well, no one told us how many wet signatures to use, right? It's like we're setting this factory up in Mexico, and we would routinely get pinged by our JV partner. They're being like, "Hey, you need to be here tomorrow to sign." And we're like, why didn't anyone tell us that last week? We're flying in from the US. I mean, it's like, okay. So booked very last minute flights for that. That's been fun. I thought maybe we could go through like the business case for why you should do it, why you shouldn't do it, and we can go through some of the options. How does that sound?
Love it.
Cool. So business case for opening your own factory. What do you guys feel the reasons are? Like what makes it a good idea?
I think, if you get it right, the economics, you're getting thicker economics on everything. So I opened like I was selling paper flowers for a little while, and I had one until we trained the supplier in China for like a year, and they got it. But then because it took so much training for them, and they're the only ones that could make these paper flowers, they just jacked up the prices because they had total leverage over us. And honestly, it killed the company because we could never get the economics to work. And so when you have that stuff under your control, no one's gonna like arbitrarily jack up the prices. And I think and it can also be competitive advantage, right? Because if you have any competitors, well, if they're not vertically integrated, you're just gonna have better economics, especially if you sell on marketplaces like Amazon.
Right. Anything he thought's true?
I go back and forth on it. Like, I know the Oats Overnights people just like launched a factory. Like my friend Nick that he doesn't run it anymore, but he started Kettle and Fire. Like they're opening a factory. Everybody seems to be like opening a factory.
You started that with Justin, right?
It's his brother, yeah. Nick and Justin are brothers.
Cool. I talked to one of them. I forget which one I talked to. I think it was Justin. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick's got like a new thing now. But he's helping open the factory. It's in Wisconsin, I think. And there's very clear like avenues for like margin expansion, of course. Just from like a cost of goods perspective. I don't know if one of you guys has a better sense of this, but like I don't know that like if you get from an M&A perspective, if you get bought by like a larger company, like, I don't know that they're going to give you a ton of credit for spending $20 million on opening a factory. It's like, we're just going to plug you into our existing distribution. So I think it makes sense if you're like trying to cash flow, but
Agreed.
People think that it's like a competitive advantage. And I don't know if I totally agree.
A lot of acquirers, like, they just want to buy, like, they'll literally just buy your trademark and like those assets, and they like refuse to buy the asset of your factory. It depends on the business, but a lot of times, like Procter & Gamble doesn't want to buy your little mini factory. They want the brand and those, and like they're gonna do the manufacturing or contract manufacturing themselves. Because it's a huge risk, right? When I was at Teespring, we contracted out all the t-shirt printing, and we're like, oh, we'll have more control and all these things if we do it at better margins. We do it ourselves. So we raised like $70 million, and it just kept bleeding money and basically bled the company dry because it was just we could never get the costs under control. And it can be hard to also match supply and demand. So maybe you have either oversupply or undersupply because you can't just quickly scale it up if you own it yourself.
Yeah, for us, it's always
right. So like
I was going to say, like, we prefer anything with manufacturing ops when it's like a reasonable moat. There's a reason to do it. Like we see a lot of people go out and build a factory for literally no reason other than like maybe a little bit of margin expansion, but I don't think that's worth it. Like to your guys' point, it's just so much headache, and it's really hard to run a factory, right? It just eats up so much of your time and the space in your brain. You'll just be thinking about it constantly. Stuff always goes wrong. We had people like doing meth in the bathrooms, pooping on the floors.
What?
We had the FBI show up to arrest someone. He was a pedo. What else happened? We had another guy who got in trouble for like attempted murder, just all sorts of crazy stuff. And
depends on what your Mexico factory?
No, that's the US. Our Mexican team's way better than that. We don't. I don't. There's a reason that factory was moved out of the US to Mexico. But the big advantages for us are things like working capital improvements, doubling down on winning SKUs, and then product dev can be really, really fast too, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you're not waiting for samples to ship back and forth. You're doing it all in-house. You can do it really fast. You can develop proprietary methods for certain things. Like we have a jewelry brand, and that one, the working capital requirements are basically nothing because our raw materials are so cheap. If we were importing like a bunch of finished goods, we couldn't have nearly as many SKUs on the website. And our working capital costs would just be way higher. Some of our competitors do that and they don't have the same advantage we do. So that's what makes sense to us. Like we have another company that sells succulents online, like the little desert plants. Actually, Sam, you're in California, right?
Yeah.
Do you know where Riverside is?
Of course.
Yeah, it's like a little further out there towards the desert.
Yeah. The armpit of California.
Yeah, so we the not cool part basically. So we bought this company when it was really distressed, and then we bought it like a 24-acre farm and bolted that on, and that made a lot of sense because the supply chain before for that was like you would have to physically walk around in farms and tell them like which succulents you wanted and what you wanted to rope off more or less, and that was like 2018 or something. And so it made a lot of sense for us to go vertical, and that was a big advantage for us because now we drop ship. Like most of our business is drop shipping for large B2B retailers.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of a cool edge. But I think unless you can get an edge like that, plus the margin expansion doesn't really make sense. It's hard to justify.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times too where even like I had a business where we were doing kind of like it was more like assembly on demand,
right?
But it just gives us, like you said, I think if it gives you some competitive advantage in terms of like what products you can deliver, and it's not something that can just easily be outsourced to China or I guess these days Vietnam, and it's like it gives you some like kind of unique product advantage. That's really what you want to think about it in my mind at least.
It kind of parlays nicely into like the FIGS story if we just want to briefly give the update on those guys. So just because they're opening like a distribution center, and so it's not their manufacturing. I don't know exactly how their manufacturing does, but I think it's one of the more interesting stories in broader D2C right now, because they're obviously like a public company. And I did like a write up on them. I've been covering them for a while. I've become friendly with their COO. And like it seems to me to be like a pretty clear like bottoming out in a lot of their sort of negative trends.
Did you buy the stock?
So they no, I have not yet.
Okay.
But I think I might. This is not financial advice. Past performance is not indicative of future results. So like it's just interesting because like what I keep coming back to, talk about TAM. I mean, Sam, it sounded like you had a little bit of experience with this. It's a $72 billion market. How does that? I don't even get how that makes sense. Like $72 billion of medical apparel. Like, does anybody like? Do you guys know? Like, how is that even?
Maybe it gets dirty and you have to replace it a lot. I don't know.
That seems wrong, but maybe that's crazy.
No, that's their numbers. So maybe it's a little bit favorable.
How often do you have to throw scrubs?
I guess like the global market plus they're probably bundling in some other stuff there. That's probably not scrubs, but like dotted line. But yeah,
just like medical apparel broadly. So it could be like shoe, like footwear. Like these footwear markets quietly are like insane.
You want to know? Vesti, the shoe company?
Yeah.
The way they got really big was they seeded their product at hospitals, more or less, and they got like popular nurses and surgeons and stuff wearing them. And then if you ever go to a hospital, especially in Canada, you'll see everyone wearing vesties, more or less, especially in Vancouver because they're from here. But I went to the hospital the other day and like 4 out of 10 of the nurses wearing vesties. I thought it was crazy. Super interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, they're on their feet all day. They need good shoes, right?
Yeah.
So these guys, they're like 600 million-ish per year, all 100% essentially 100% D2C, right? So like they haven't really been growing. They posted their first, call it modest growth quarter year over year. So this quarter was 5% year over year growth. Their net income has been essentially zero for the last year. Their gross margins have gone from 46% to as low as 40%. And I'm including like shipping and stuff in that. But then gross margin sort of bottomed out from here too. And so like my whole thing with these guys is like, you've sort of right-sized your business. Like it's basically flat. Like you're growing a little bit, like you're not losing money. Like why don't you just like launch into like different distributions channels, right? Like, I think this brand would absolutely clean up on Amazon. I think if they put stores around hospitals, like even if people don't buy at the stores, like it would probably be good for online sales. Like there could be wholesale for hospitals, right? I mean, like there's so much white space, and so I'm just curious, I guess, on what you guys think. Like, do you believe in like the opportunity for this brand? Because I'm starting to get like a little bit like more and more bullish, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not at all.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, perfect. Give us the counter argument.
I feel like there's already a lot of knockoffs being launched. I think it's just going to accelerate, eat away at their margins.
And I think it's hard to say like the premium cool brand, right? If you're doing wholesale to hospitals, like the whole premise is like scrubs are ugly. Now you got some cute scrub that's like, maybe a status symbol. And all of a sudden now, if everybody's getting that as their default uniform, you're doing wholesale, then it just becomes like kind of the
commoditized.
The commoditized, and it just loses its status of like being the cool one. And so now something else is going to rise up and become like the higher the high status like premium version of this category. So so your real TAM probably isn't just the 700 billion. It's like your TAM is like what's the market for premium scrubs that are not just some commodity product. And I think I mean, you could move into other stuff, but you just like you have to worry about your brand as soon as you start selling like the kind of the generic stuff.
Right.
That's an interesting conundrum. It's like if you want to get really big, you have to appeal to like the mass price point, which also is dilutive if you're starting out as like a premium. So that makes sense.
It's like Raya dating app, right? It's supposed to be for celebrities, and it's like great, but then once they got that, they're like, what do we do? Oh, we'll start letting like more and more people on, and then eventually it just becomes a crappier version of Hinge or whatever else. So
true. Isn't that how you met your girlfriend?
I met my girlfriend on Hinge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you guys think it's easier to go up market then, is what you're implying, than down market as a consumer brand?
You kind of have to.
It just depends. I don't know if it's always the case. I just think sometimes like Rolex, like what's their market? Their premium brand. Like they're never going to go down market because it'll kill the whole business. And it's probably hard to start with like a cheap watch brand and go and then eventually compete to Rolex. I just think sometimes your TAM is your TAM, and you're going to be if you're a premium brand, like you have to just sit in that category. Maybe you just raise prices and become more premium. But like Ferrari,
actually,
like
a good example in that category is like the third biggest seller of watches, I think, is Richard Mille, and they're obviously like 6-figure watches. And Patec's fairly high as far as revenue. I'm just talking about like overall revenue. Those are like the highest new brands, are also like just somewhat like oddly, they're really big. Like there's no volume in that. It's all about like just a really high price point.
I think what you maybe do, right, is you take like the auto manufacturer approach, right, which is you have you have GM kind of invented this, right? They had Cadillac for the premium brand, and then you have Chevrolet for the everyday consumer, and you kind of maybe own a portfolio of brands, and you leverage your supply chain network to be able to like get the economics to work. So maybe FIGS launches like FIGS Basic or whatever it is for hospitals, and then they can create an ultra premium brand for other folks. And so I think ultimately that you kind of have to end up doing something like that. But you lose some, obviously, that like is the supply chain advantage in scrubs that strong? Auto makes sense, right? This is supply chain is insane. For something like scrubs, it's such a easy to make good. I don't know how those advantages, how deep those actually run.
That makes sense.
Time will tell us.
Time will tell us. Oh wow, the stock has had an interesting run.
It's super volatile. I think it was like down a bunch on this print, and then it's kind of come back, and now it's. I mean, they got offered $1 billion back in December for the company from Story 3 Capital, and they said no. And that was like what intrigued me about it, because I was like, that's bold.
They didn't get sued by the shareholders at all for saying no?
No, well, not maybe someone sued, but they have like this one like big billionaire backer who's basically like publicly like F you guys, which is what caused me to start looking into it. And I think it's like a turnaround story, but like as far as I can tell, it looks to be working. And it's like, it's in the early stages of it. Like, we're not on the upswing yet, but we're definitely like kind of bottoming out by every account from my analysis. And like LT or their AOV, for example, has gone up, 10% in the last like 2 quarters, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you consider it as like a leading indicator of LTV and how the ramifications on that over time, along with the fact that they're opening a new distribution center and trying to get some leverage on the gross margin line, I think like if you can repair your gross margin in these apparel businesses, like it just opens up the world for you.
Right.
Especially when there's so much low hanging fruit from a distribution perspective, in my opinion. So I like what I see here, but I understand the counter arguments, and it's just a brutal category in general, honestly.
I think apparel is very cyclical, right? You have these companies, they rise high, then they collapse, then they come back, and then they go back down.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like who is the my favorite example is that one sweatshirt brand, Champion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They're incredibly unpopular. Yeah. They're like what you would buy if you couldn't afford like Nike when you're like younger.
And now it's like a streetwear brand.
And then it became like it became really weirdly popular, trendy like 5-6 years ago, and then it died again. To your point, Sam.
Yeah, I think Abercrombie had a thing recently where like it went down. Then J. Crew, I think if you bought J. Crew stock at the right time, you're outperforming like Nvidia or something. So I think
no way.
these things like they come and go, and you have to kind of ride surf the wave. So I'm always impressed when you see apparel brands. You have something like American Apparel or Urban Outfitters, and they're constantly having to completely change out their inventory to stay on trend. And it's like really actually impressive that you're able to stay on trend and generations change and you kind of adapt to that. Like you can't just like sit on your hands. You have to constantly be moving. And so I'm always impressed when these companies last a long time, but I'm not putting my money in them. But you can make a ton of money, right? Like the founder of Zara, I think he was one of like the richest people on earth.
Mm-hmm. They're cool because they're just like a wild supply chain game.
Broadly in apparel, all the trend risk is true. I think part of the reason that like the counter argument for FIGS' case is like it's less of like fashion and it's more of like a utility, right? Like you just people kind of need it. So maybe we should do a poly market on that with the 3 of us and see who wins. We'll give it 4 quarters. Give me a year. And we'll see.
You could just buy the stock or short it or something.
It's only fun if somebody loses too, though.
That's true.
somebody has to win and lose.
My wife was complaining by text that we don't do an outro. She said, look at least Sean from Bridge does the outro and theirs really well. And I'm like, what
does he say?
I don't even know what he said. She's texted me. She's like, look, this outro is so much better. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, well.
Maybe we just keep this as the outro. This is
we should keep this as an outro. Shout out to my wife, Haley, for the critique on the outro. So this is our new outro. Thank you to our sponsors, Phil, Numeral. We had our Uncle Sam here, came on from Numeral, head of taxation, and Iris and Fondue. Anything else for the outro, Mr. Drew?